Mr. President.
Senator from Nebraska.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Ukrainian people have captured the hearts of freedom-loving men and women around the world since Putin launched his unprovoked invasion of their homeland last week. Even as we speak, they are still under attack, not just in the capital of Kyiv, but in cities all across Ukraine. The images coming out of Ukraine are truly heartbreaking. Newborn babies in need of intensive care, kindergarten buildings and apartment complexes being shelled indiscriminately, and tearful goodbyes between loved ones. Putin's invasion has caused Europe's largest refugee crisis this century. According to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, nearly 900,000 Ukrainians have fled to neighboring countries so far. But many of the other images we have seen show inspiring courage. Citizens of EU countries have welcomed their Ukrainian neighbors with open arms. Regular, everyday men and women, teachers and software engineers and moms and dads have taken up arms to defend their country and their loved ones. And President Zelensky has chosen to remain in Ukraine when he could have fled, refusing to desert his people in their darkest hour. The English writer G.K. Chesterton once said, quote, "The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him." I can't think of a better way to describe this conflict. The Russians are fighting to fulfill Putin's imperial ambitions. The Ukrainians are fighting to protect their families, their democracy, and everything that they hold dear. And that may be their greatest advantage as they, God willing, continue to hold out in the coming days. Responsibility for this horrific invasion lies squarely with Putin. Leading up to this crisis, President Biden and our allies offered Russia every opportunity to choose de-escalation and peace. Instead, Putin chose to use diplomacy as a smokescreen, buying time while he prepared for war. In a deliberate message of contempt for the international community, Putin ordered the attack to begin while the UN Security Council was meeting to discuss Russia's buildup on the Ukrainian border. And here's a glimpse into how little power organizations like the UN have in moments of crisis like this. During this meeting on what to do about Russia's coming invasion, the Russian ambassador was presiding. Innocent Ukrainians, as young as 6 years old, are being killed because one man fancies himself the next Joseph Stalin. Because of one man's desire to restore the borders of the Soviet Union, the fundamental principles of security in Europe are in peril. In response to this invasion, President Biden has announced new sanctions against Russia. These measures will affect two of Russia's largest banks, Sberbank and VTB, as well as 45 of their subsidiaries. The administration is also imposing sanctions against several other Russian financial institutions and a number of state-owned enterprises. The United States, with our allies and partners, not just in Europe but also in Asia, have agreed to pursue even more aggressive sanctions against Russia. That includes beginning to remove certain Russian banks from the global SWIFT financial messaging network. It includes freezing the currency reserves of Russia's central bank. All of this will make Putin and his inner circle feel the pain. It will hurt Russia's ability to wage war now and in the future. Many companies are joining this effort on their own, and they are withdrawing from the Russian market. Putin's unprecedented aggression demands unprecedented response. Beyond economic sanctions, this invasion has only made the NATO alliance stronger and more resolved to stand firm against unlawful aggression. This includes Germany, which has traditionally taken a more positive view of Russia than many of our other European allies. Germany's Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, has rightly committed to increasing Germany's military investment after decades of putting defense spending on their back burner. Scholz also said Germany would seriously pursue options to reduce their reliance on Russia for natural gas. If he follows through on increasing Germany's military spending, that will bring German defense investment above the 2% target NATO has set for its members by 2024, a target that most NATO countries still aren't meeting. While historically neutral Sweden and Finland are considering joining NATO, they aren't members yet, but they're still sending much-needed military aid to Ukraine. Even Switzerland has broken its tradition of neutrality to freeze billions in Russian assets being held in Swiss banks. And our other allies and partners around the world, like Japan and Australia, are helping fund the Ukrainian resistance as well. After this near-universal condemnation from the world's democracies, Putin hasn't backed down. No, he's turned to nuclear blackmail. He put Russia's nuclear forces into special combat readiness on Sunday, explicitly using Russia's nuclear deterrent to discourage Western nations from supporting Ukraine. This kind of escalation is unthinkable to Americans, but not to Putin. This is why the men and women of U.S. Strategic Command, which is based at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, work day and night to deter threats like these. There's a reason that their motto is, "Peace is our profession." Separately, at least 5 office-based jets from the Air Force's 55th Wing are flying reconnaissance missions in Europe. Together, these planes have flown 10 of the 86 missions the United States and our NATO allies carried out in the days leading up to the Russian attack. I was told of these missions during a visit to Offutt last Friday. In addition to what we've done so far, I believe the Ukraine crisis demands that we fundamentally reevaluate our approach in dealing with Putin. We can no longer pretend that he might one day play by the same rules as the rest of us. Since he came to power, presidents of both parties have sought to improve relations with him. Too often, they have overlooked decades of bad behavior to try to achieve that goal, hoping that American restraint might lead Moscow to take that same approach. If it wasn't clear even before this attack, the events of the past week have proven that idea to be a fantasy. Putin thought Russia would get a quick win when he invaded Ukraine. He never expected this kind of resistance from the outmatched and the outnumbered Ukrainians. But he didn't account for their bravery. He didn't account for the fact that while Russia is fighting to gobble up more land in Eastern Europe, the Ukrainians are fighting to protect their children, spouses, parents, and their very way of life. After the events of the past week, Putin's naked aggression, his imperial ambitions, and his contempt for the international order are undeniable. Global norms and treaty obligations mean nothing. They mean nothing to him. Russia had explicitly sworn to uphold Ukraine's territorial integrity in the 1994 Budapest Memorandum. One more agreement added to the long list of those Russia has violated under Putin. After his completely unprovoked invasion, this would-be 21st century czar has lost whatever credibility he had left. The United States and our allies must keep this in mind as we think about where we go from here. We have to accept that as long as Putin is in power, a cooperative relationship with Russia will not be possible. We have to do what we can to push back against Putin's warmongering and continue to support the brave people of Ukraine. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.